The bandwidth for this episode of the AR15 podcast is sponsored by the Firearms Radio Network. Firearmsradio.tv.
Welcome to episode number 95 of the AR15 podcast. I'm your host, Reed Snyder, and with me today is JW Ramp. This is the podcast about your favorite black rifle. This show is for you whether you're building your first AR or you've been building ARs for years. There's something we can all do to take our black rifle to the next level. JW, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right.
So tell me, how have you been keeping yourself with news of our pending giveaway?
Oh, I'm excited to see that drawing and see the reaction from whoever ends up getting it delivered.
Well, I want you to know that we have drawn the name. It is currently our drawing is being audited by one of the big four. I'm sure you know who they are. They do one of the big award shows. But in the meantime, we're going to finish up our filming of the rifle, and I've already sighted the rifle in. Of course, that'll have to be redone, but it shoots like a dream. It's really, really a sweet shooting rifle. So I'm excited for whoever it is that wins. Not that I don't know who that is. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But for any of you who, I guess, haven't really been keeping up, the drawing eligibility period ended on the 30th of September. So no more applications after that time. I'm sorry for any of you that may have missed that, but of course we're going to endeavor to do another giveaway as soon as we can get turned around. We, of course, have a listener of the AR15 podcast who is the first recipient of a rifle, and we're going to find out whether or not he's happy with his. I just want you to know that Jake was the one that built that, not me. So in any case, we'll be having him on the show for our announcement, and we'll be announcing it on our Halloween show for the podcast. So I'm not sure how many episodes out that is, but I think it releases Halloween Day. So the 31st of October is when you will probably hear the news as far as the release of the podcast, and that is when we will put the name in our automated email response system so that anybody who's interested can go to the show and find out who the winner is. So I think we've got you all up to date on that. So JW and I are real excited to, well, I am. I think JW is just completely neutral on all things that, are...
That I don't get to touch and put together and play with myself.
You see, why did you have to bring up the playing with yourself piece?
Well, with that, we want to make sure to thank Brownells for their sponsorship of this build and of this show in general. They support us, and we don't want you to forget that they have a 100% lifetime satisfaction guarantee, and they're there for you anytime you have a problem, like when you can't remove those taper pins from your new barrel to slip off the front sight base and you have to find a new barrel. Tell me about that, Reed. What do you got to do to make that happen? You just give them a call?
Absolutely. You just give them a call, or you can put it in a box. And if you don't even have one of their return forms, you can just write it on a note and tell them what you want done with it, and they'll do their dead level best to help you out. I'm thinking that you have to identify yourself and give them some key information like your mailing address and stuff like that. But the rest of it's pretty foolproof.
Perfect. So yeah, if you visit ar15podcast.com/parts, you'll be able to go over and shop Brownells and let them know that you're coming from us.
Outstanding. So this week's show is about something that I have a particular fondness for. It is, well, more broadly speaking, it is about underslung weapons. All of those things that many people see slung to the underside of their AR barrels, but don't understand or don't know how or whether they are legal. So we're here to tell you. But with that, our product of the week is a Lewis Machine and Tool M203 grenade launcher. And I want you to understand that the LMT grenade launcher has a 9-inch barrel assembly. It has a 1 in 48-inch twist. It fires a host of 40 millimeter munitions, including but not limited to flare, smoke, training, and incendiary rounds. And this beauty, which retails for $1,500 and is in stock at the website, is currently legal to own by civilian citizens. I guess citizens, civilians. You and I, the people. So, we put a link in the show notes. We'd like you to go out and take a look at it because obviously this is really kind of an awesome thing to think that for $1,500 you can get a grenade launcher. I mean, really, where else but America can that happen? Well, okay, a flea market in the streets of Mogadishu, but that's kind of different. So tonight's show, we're going to look at weapons that can be mounted underneath our favorite black rifle. So, JW, I know that you've been around a lot of people and a lot of professionals that put on classes and start the schools, and your colleagues and friends that are part of the kind of the firearms industry on the retail side and some of their Title II items. Have you ever had a chance to come near any of the grenade launchers?
I really haven't. I've pulled the trigger on a couple just kind of standalone flare guns at night shoots and stuff like that to shoot up a parachute flare just to light up the range and kind of give it a different perspective when you're running through the dark. But no, I mean, some of the guys that use these professionally, I know that it's just a huge tool for them on the battlefield to be able to launch something that's an area weapon that can go into buildings, around buildings, and it's definitely a specialized tool that they can use for those certain circumstances where precision fire from the 5.56 might not be getting the job done. So the 203, I think it's definitely gets some pretty serious use.
So if I told you could get one at only $1,500, does that start wheels turning in your head?
A little bit. I just got done with like a pretty lightweight build, so maybe I need to go completely to the opposite end of the spectrum. I mean, why carry one gun when you can carry two in one? And
that's right. Well, and with something that's too light, you might have some issues with recoil and controllability.
Especially with such a big, mean round like the 5.56.
Absolutely. So I think, mounting an M203 grenade launcher with the 9-inch barrel is definitely going to help you stabilize.
Yeah, your follow-up shots are just going to be right through the same hole.
Oh yeah. Well, so all kidding aside, it may surprise some of you, may not surprise all of you, but you can own a civilian, right? You can own a military-grade weapon like the M203 grenade launcher in a 40 millimeter configuration. We'll get into the legality of that. We'll get into some of the other issues, but that's kind of, to me, an amazing threshold just to even, be able to entertain.
Yeah, I mean, we operate in a world where we're firing pieces of lead or copper or whatever, and they just kind of go straight down range and they punch a hole through the paper. But when you enter specialty shotgun shells or 37 or 40 millimeter grenades, there's a whole nother world that opens up as far as other capabilities, rather than just punching holes through things. So
absolutely. So here's my thought. Essentially, in our top category, we've got grenade launchers, and we've got the M203. I'm sure if any of you have watched modern films, anything related to current conflicts overseas, you've probably seen one of these in the hands of one of our soldiers, one of our Marines, airmen, sailors, whatever the case may be. But the other two items we have up here really kind of are, I guess, in a category all unto themselves, but are not the 40 millimeter grenade launcher. They are 37 millimeter flare launchers. And I think that the first one that really kind of came on the scene was somewhere in the 80s or so, but it was the Cobra 37 millimeter flare launcher. And if you were to ever see one, it had kind of the 80s era mounting system, which looked like a narrow piece of handguard that would fit over a barrel. It was, I don't think, a quick on or off configuration, but my first exposure to the grenade launchers was seeing a mounting system very similar to that. But the one that's more contemporary is the Spike's Tactical 37 millimeter grenade or flare launcher. And the reason that it is, I guess, a more conventional, more contemporary improvement on the Cobra is that their flare launcher mounts on Picatinny rails. And so I think you're probably looking at a larger than 50% segment of the AR owners out there that are probably sporting some kind of a rail handguard on their rifle and could easily mount one of the Spike's Tactical flare launchers.
Yeah,
So,
and there's quite a few more features that the Spikes features. I mean, you can, rather than having maybe a female Picatinny adapter on the top, you can throw like a male on it and have its own piece of Picatinny upon which you can put sighting devices. You can actually put a stock on the back of it and use it standalone. So that's kind of a capability that quite a few of these rail-mounted devices have, that you can actually pull them off and use them standalone.
And I think the idea of a standalone bracketing system, if you're going to actually use it for its intended purpose, which is to mount flares, you may not always have access to your rifle. But it is an interesting idea. Basically stepping down out of that, I guess, realm of the destructive devices, and JW, I don't think I could tell you exactly why it's not a destructive device, other than the fact that you probably don't have anybody making any anti-personnel or high explosive munitions for a 37 millimeter chambering.
Right. It seems like more of a historical sort of a distinction that the 40 mil is where all those grenades are manufactured, or for that size, and so they made something just a hair smaller so you could still have similar munitions, but the kind of standard issue military munitions aren't going to be able to be fired out of that smaller barrel.
And what do you think the likelihood is that the original flares of, I don't know, naval flares for shipping and maritime, what do you call it?
Signaling
Merchant
flares.
Marines? Yeah, but I mean the Merchant Marines, basically anybody who was sitting on a boat, from the turn of the century until the, end of, the last decade, I mean, they're all probably using the same types of flares they've been using all that time, and I wonder if those haven't all historically been a 37 millimeter flare.
Yeah, I think the kind of the history of the 37 is that it was always used for gas, firing gas grenades by police, and so similar to some of the less than lethal options that police are given that just physically can't chamber lethal rounds. It was that sort of an idea.
I see.
This is your gas gun, this is your gas launcher versus a military level high explosive launcher.
Well, we also have another grenade launcher that I'm sure any fan of the FN product line, more especially of the, um, oh geez, help me out. You own one. Scar, the Scar.
Okay.
Any
Yep.
fan of the Scar has probably seen a picture with the FN's Mark 13 mounted underneath it.
Which is
And,
pretty mean looking.
it is. You know, designing a weapon with a certain degree of antagonism in it is a skill, and I would hazard a guess that FN has got that market cornered because it does look pretty intimidating.
Right. I mean, we're operating on a mostly audio format here, but if you will, the standard 203, it positions the secondary trigger for that grenade launcher in front of your magazine. So you have to change your grip and kind of grip your mag to get up and launch the grenade launcher. The SCAR actually comes with a slot behind the grenade launcher that the magazine slides up into. So it's almost like an extension on your magwell, behind which is an additional trigger. So the grenade launcher trigger is directly below the rifle's trigger. So you can stay right on the grip and switch between the two without having to kind of move your hands around. So just kind of one of the big distinctions between the two systems. I'm sure you could put one of these Smart Spikes launchers on your SCAR because there's a bunch of Picatinny real estate underneath the SCAR. But if you were to go with the EGLM, that's kind of the made-for solution.
Now, I wanna, in the spirit of openness here, let you know that we tried to find out all we could about obtaining the Mark 13, and while there are some indicators that it is eligible to be sold to a civilian market, just like the M203, I can't say that we've been able to identify exactly who that seller would be. So it may not be available in any meaningful way, and it might, but didn't want to mislead you there and leave you hanging on that idea. So I think that really rounds up what I would say are the conventional domestically manufactured items that are capable of being mounted underneath your MSR that would launch either a flare or a grenade of some type. But what other things are out there that can also fit in that space and serve a purpose? And so JW went out and found basically 3 outstanding alternatives to grenade launchers that I think have some pretty good utilitarian use. You want to kind of start off with the first one there, JW?
Yeah, I mean, some people have heard the term master. It's kind of a comedic take on the use of these undermounted shotguns that rather than needing a key or a lock picking set, you just use your master key, which is your shotgun, to blow your way right into the whatever door you're trying to pass. So that's kind of what this category is known by. I believe Knights kind of came out with the first master key. Is that right, Reed?
I believe so. And I think it's a modified Remington 870.
Yeah, so it's kind of like just a cut down 870 without a stock, and it's mounted underneath the rail through a couple different mounting methods, but it's basically a pump shotgun with maybe a 3-round capacity, and you can load that up with breaching rounds, and rather than having to switch from your breaching shotgun back over to your rifle or pistol, it's just right there. Breach the door, go in, charging hard. So the Knights was kind of the typical one. You've seen some other guys maybe come up with some modifications to make for good TV, for example. But I know last year, was it at SHOT Show that Cry kind of made some splashes with their
Absolutely
undermounted shotgun? I really didn't expect that from them. I mean, they got the Gucci pants, they got all the nylon, the tactical nylon, but now they're coming out with a undermounted SBS.
Well, have you taken a close look at it?
Not too much. I mean, it's a 6-shot 12 gauge, and rather than having a traditional magazine, it's almost a rotary drum,
Right.
almost like the cylinder of a revolver, but for 12 gauge.
And I think that it really has that same kind of contemporary ominous feel that the Mark 13 does from FN. Um, there's a little bit of Hollywood in that rifle. I'm sure it'll clear an opening, but wow, that thing is real intimidating.
Now, how does it actually operate? Is that magazine, if you will, does it rotate on its own under spring tension? Do you wind it up like one of those um, 40 millimeter grenade launchers?
Honestly, I was not assigned to it. I know that we have video on our YouTube page, and I believe it was our VP of marketing that went out and had the interview.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a lot of nights of sleep since then, so I can't recall in the recesses of my mind.
Yeah, it's
But
interesting because it's set up like a bullpup, and
right,
it's actually just like a lot of these other ones. You can set it up standalone, so they have an entire platform for it to ride in with mag pull, hand grip, and it's quite a platform.
well, and the thing that is interesting to me is that the trigger, being a bullpup, is right out at the end of where you would normally have your hand array for uh, your offhand support.
Hmm.
So I think
Rather than
the
having like a
intention,
forward hand stop, that's kind of
yeah,
like the pistol grip of your Cry 612.
yeah, and so your index finger is fitting comfortably inside the trigger well, and um, there from any observable outside images that we've got, uh, there doesn't appear to be anything that causes you to advance it by virtue of a trigger pull. So it may very well be either automatic or you may turn it manually.
Hmm.
But it's really an interesting design, and I would like to have a chance to put some time into it and see how it actually functions in that capacity. So what's the last one we have here?
That's the Seymour M26. What's the story with that?
Well, my understanding was that uh, the folks over at Seymour, trying to, I guess, upstage a certain firearms manufacturing facility, decided to come to the table with their own variant. And I think they were awarded a contract to the government for it. But it appears to be it's a box fed or a magazine fed 12 gauge. I don't know what the platform is, but it appears to be very similar in function in presentation to the AR. So it may have some legs in that platform for its construction, but it appears to be. Did you say it was pump fed?
Yeah, so rather than it being like a forward hand grip, sort of a pump action shotgun like the 870, it's got a charging handle that kind of flips out on a spring, like a spring-loaded charging handle. And
I
so
see.
instead of a magazine tube, it's got a removable magazine that stacks up the rounds just like a regular rifle mag. And between rounds, you just run that charging handle. Um, so it's maybe a little more compact than the full racking of a typical shotgun.
Well, it is pretty ominous looking. Now, it of course found some adherents in the military, and I think really that's kind of the blessing that makes a lot of these special use weapons viable in any of these markets. Without that blessing, it's just so much more. What would you call it? Bling. So much more hoop and whatever the rest of that
Whatever
statement
those
is.
kids are saying nowadays.
Yeah. In any case, you know, to me, I'm still a little more drawn to the Master Key or the Cry Precision simply because neither one of those have an unwieldy, magazine sticking out of the bottom of it.
Yeah, the cool thing about the Cry is because it's a bullpup, you can actually get a full-length barrel, like an 18-inch barrel and a stock to put it over your minimum OAL limits, and just buy it like a regular shotgun.
Right.
Do you know the legality of actually attaching it to your rifle, even in that configuration? Would that make it into
Well,
something else?
my understanding is that it would have to, in its own right, meet a minimum overall length. So,
Taking the stock off, putting it on your AR.
it doesn't allow it to meet on its own a minimum overall length because the AR is a separate rifle and that is not its, component.
You're filtering it with the AR.
Yeah, no. So I don't think that there's any way to get around that minimum overall length for the shotgun itself.
Right.
And you'd almost be saying that by mounting it underneath an AR, I want it to absorb a rifle stock and become a longer shotgun than it is. And I just don't think that any ATF agent has brought himself to the point of allowing an eager buyer to pull that one over on them.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting. I think they're supposed to come out, quote unquote, winter 2014. So maybe we'll be seeing them here in a little bit.
Well, isn't it now winter 2014? Because I'm pretty sure that we. No. I take that back. I'm sorry. It's not winter yet. Maybe it was winter 2014 back in January. Oh, wow. So I think that covers up pretty much all of our shotgun options for mounting underneath an AR. So let's start off with some of the other options that we found. And I think we'll start off with our options in terms of most available to least available. So I think first off is the old-fashioned bayonet. As long as you have a post-ban AR or a pre-ban AR.
Pre-ban or post-ban, just not ban.
Yeah. At that point, you can have a bayonet mount on your rifle, and therefore you can have a bayonet.
Yep.
The Zip 22, that's kind of an interesting little 22 caliber firearm that got a whole lot of publicity, and I don't
just
think
kind of disappeared.
Yeah, I think it launched with a whimper, and I think there was the configuration that was engineered to be a underbarrel mounted 22 caliber option.
For some reason, I'm not really sure what the intention of that was. I don't know if there's any way to kind of adjust your point of aim with it, or how you'd end up sighting it in, but there's pictures. Somebody did it. So
now, you wonder why, and I cannot for the life of me come up with a reason why you would want to do that. But I will tell you that, and I'm sure that if I'm wrong, someone will point it out, but my recollection was that in the 80s, the Marine Corps had a, what do we call it, a small SMAW. It was basically a missile.
Mm-hmm.
And it had, I can't remember how many, it had a number of 9mm cartridges that you could fire off to kind of, I think they were like, not necessarily tracers, but I think the idea was
rounds.
Huh?
They were like sighter rounds or something?
Yeah. I think that's what the mechanism or the intention was, that they'd be sighter rounds, that you'd fire them off and you'd get some hits. And the smalls, I think, were like bunker busters.
Yeah, I mean, smalls are like the typical, like, big old 5-foot thing over your shoulder.
Well, it's not even 5 foot. I mean, yeah, it's a big shoulder-mounted missile, but it's a one and done. I don't remember it being reloadable.
Okay.
And the Law rocket was less
Kind of
guidable.
modern equivalent of the disposable rocket.
I couldn't tell you. There really has been a lot of...
kind of like unfolds on you.
Oh, the Law, yeah, but I mean, the Law's been around since the 60s.
Okay.
They carried those in Vietnam. So the SWAW was
I
an
saw a
evolution.
photo of those recently. It was on a rooftop overseas, and the rooftop was just littered with empty Laws. There must have been like 40 or 50 of them, and the caption was like, "Use it or lose it." And somebody had gotten a crate full of those and went to town.
I guess. I wonder if that wasn't a picture of the Americans leaving Saigon. In any case, so that would be our first two. I think our third would be a chainsaw. Now, JW, tell me you found an actual chainsaw that could be mounted to your rails.
Oh yeah, and spattered with green painted zombie blood, of course.
Ah, I see. A zombie-inspired underbarrel-mounted chainsaw.
Yep.
Well, of course, yeah. So the last one is, I think, one that any old fan of Aliens or Alien will tell you about. From the movie Aliens, the flamethrower. Now, of course, it doesn't come with a Picatinny rail attachment. I think you have to use some kind of industrial space duct tape to mount it to your, what is it, M41 plasma rifle.
There you go.
If anybody out there does know of a flamethrower that you can mount to a modern sporting rifle, we'd be more than happy to highlight it in one of our shows. We might even give you a guest appearance for actually being able to come up with one of those. Although I don't even think that's covered by the National Firearms Act. I'm pretty sure you might get into trouble with the live flamethrower. Like,
Yeah,
kind of trouble.
never had a reason to look up those laws.
Yeah, I don't know if it qualifies as a firearm or not.
I guess if you're bored and you feel like bugging your local ATF office, you can make the call.
All right. Well, so what does the legality of these things mean in terms of our desire to go around and acquire some of these? I think the first thing that we have to remember is that we're basically dealing with two different types of categories as classified by the National Firearms Act. And JW, if you concur, it's basically short-barreled shotguns and destructive devices. Does that sum it up for you as well?
Yep, those are a couple of the stamps that I've not added to my collection just yet. I do have a buddy with a short-barrel shotgun, but it's nothing mountable. It's just kind of a short shotgun.
Now, you see, I have a Benelli M4, and I've been really kind of drooling on the whole idea of getting it out there and putting that 14.5-inch barrel on it. But that takes away
Would the
so
magazine hang off the end?
No, the standard 5-round magazine is adequate for that shortened barrel.
Okay.
See, because all you're doing is taking 3.5 inches, and that's basically the 3.5 inches that overhangs the 5-round magazine.
Okay.
So they line up nicely. Well, in principle, I haven't gotten one, so I don't know for certain that they line up nicely.
Right, so we've talked about SBRs. The legal limit for shotgun barrels, is it 18.5 inches, and there's an overall length as well?
I believe that it's 18 inches.
Okay.
I believe the rifle is 16.5. But I'm going to look at that because it may be the other way around.
Yeah, I think rifle's 16, or quote-unquote over 16. So guys will go for 16.1 or something like that, just to, like when you're doing a 14.5 and you're putting a flash hider on it and permanently attaching it, guys will kind of want to go just a hair over. So the short barrel shotgun, obviously, if you've got an 18.5-inch barrel underneath your AR, along with the action and all that, that shotgun's going to be hanging way out in front of your barrel. So the kind of the typical configuration is to chop it way down. You're not going to be shooting clays with your master key necessarily, although I'm sure you could get some hits on YouTube if you decided to do that, or if you were Jerry Mikulik. So the precision fire with your breaching rounds isn't necessarily a concern. This is something that you're going to be maybe even holding right up in contact with the door or the whatever you're breaching. So going a short barrel kind of makes sense for the ergonomics of the platform.
Now let me add some technical data here. So a shotgun must have a barrel length of a minimum of 18 inches. So it's 16 inches for a rifle, 18 inches for a shotgun, and a shotgun must have an overall length of at least 27 inches. So I think that Master Key appeared to have a barrel length of about 10 inches. It had a 3-round magazine,
Mm-hmm.
the workings for a pump action, and the receiver. So it probably wasn't much more than 17 inches long. So on both counts, it was far shorter than it should have been.
Right. And so if you have it stamped and everything, you can always pull it off and put a stock on it and use it like a sawed-off shotgun, basically. You're gonna need to go through the same NFA tech stamp process as you would with a silencer, a short barrel rifle, or a machine gun.
Now, the destructive device is something that, in the case of a grenade launcher, is going to impact two components of it. The first, of course, being the actual launcher itself.
Mm-hmm.
But the second would be any munition or submunition of the M203 grenade launcher that the ATF feels is an explosive device or a destructive device. So high explosive, any of the flechette or anti-personnel rounds would probably, and I believe in fact do fall under the destructive device category. So the downside to owning the M203 grenade launcher is that if you're ever going to shoot any high explosive munition, you just blew $200 of tax stamp that you're never getting back, and whatever you paid for the munition. So
yeah, and there's like an ounce level that you can't go over with your explosive content, and over that it turns into a DD. So you're gonna have to serialize it. You're gonna have to, I don't know if it's like the explosive part itself you serialize and it flies through the air and then explodes, and then you probably have to fill out a form saying that you just destroyed something that was on the NFA registry.
yeah.
So yeah, it's quite a process. But I mean, there's guys out there. There's guys that collect live grenades, and that's probably not something I'm going to be adding to my home collection anytime soon.
And my understanding is that if you are going to be headed in that direction with your stamp collecting, the ATF is going to require you to have installed an ATF, what would you call it? Sanctioned
battery.
Yeah, a storage. What do they call it? A magazine.
Yep.
Yeah, or a bunker, whatever it is. Whatever the device is that stores explosives, you're going to be required to have one in order to have any of those grenades. Now,
yeah, if you're really into doing this, I'd say get an FEL rather than an FFL.
Right.
And that's probably a little better way to go about it.
Well, you know, I think the reality is that most anybody that would have the wherewithal to acquire an inventory of these grenades for use.
Sounds like a true American to me.
Well, absolutely, but it's also a very successful true American.
Not a poor man's game.
No, but I mean, in the alternative, if you've decided that you're gonna stock up the bunker, a $1,500 investment in a grenade launcher, and $1,000 of tax stamps and whatever the raw cost is for high explosive grenades, probably makes you a little better equipped than most of your neighbors ever will be. So,
Or a little more likely to blow yourself up on accident.
yeah, either or. But when you think about it, JW, and I think that many people will talk about the happy switch, lovingly, but very few will actually be willing to go out and pay $25,000 or whatever they can, find one for to get one. Meanwhile, if you're going to be the one that really is saying, look, I'm going to invest for the worst case, I think you're going to be able to go much, much further with that 25 grand and a couple of boxes of grenades and some launchers than you ever will with a machine gun. I'm just saying.
That's a good point. You got to look at the economics of grenade ownership. There's some real upsides.
And just because you can't shoot them doesn't mean that you can't train to shoot them, because they have training rounds that are not destructive devices whose whole purpose is to make sure that you can train with the system and get your rounds on target.
Right. I don't know if we made the distinction, but when we're talking about the 40 mil launchers, those themselves are DDs and need a stamp. But with the 37, you can just buy it. I don't believe it's a firearm either. Is it a firearm? So it's something that just ships right to your house?
Absolutely. That's not a firearm. And here's where you kind of get into some crossover issues. You could take a 37 millimeter grenade launcher and you could register it as a destructive device. Now, I don't know if you could find much in the way of munitions for it that would qualify as being a destructive device. But
well, the one thing that would kind of get you in trouble is if it wasn't a DD, the 37, and you put an insert into it to fire shotgun rounds or a cluster of 9mm or something like that. Because it's a smooth bore, larger than 12 gauge or 50 cal or
0.5, yeah.
Well, 12 gauge itself is bigger than 50 cal, so something like that. If you start firing shotgun rounds,
12 gauge
it's just because it's a lethal round.
Yeah.
If you fire like a buckshot round out of a 37 millimeter grenade launcher, it's a lethal application, and so it needs to be a DD. The only other real restrictions on 37 are things like bean bags or rubber bullets. Those are actually DDs as well, so you can't just pick those up like you can with flares and chalk rounds.
I think the biggest issue is that anything that can be categorized as an anti-personnel munition is going to probably throw you into that realm of illegality. So if the objective, once you buy it, is to load it up and shoot it at a person, I think you're going to be in a no bueno condition there. The flip side is
right? The no bueno condition.
That is a technical term. That's a term of art. No bueno. But flares, chalk rounds. I think there are even some civilian legal gas rounds. I think smoke. You can find smoke. I'm not certain, but none of those initially have an anti-personnel intent to the development of the round. It's not what they're for, and so I don't think that you're likely to find yourself crossways with the ATF with any of those munitions.
Right. Yeah, you're just going to kind of run into a cost barrier. I mean, do you know what those run? Is it about $10 a shot for some of those flares?
No, $55.
Really? Dang.
Yeah, I've seen them for $55, and obviously the difficulty is that you're looking at essentially something that's come out of the military system. I think that it must be the way it works. Now, I don't know
Yeah, I know there's
whether
a
that's,
reloading community based around the
yeah,
37 mil, so that's definitely kind of a wormhole you could go down. But
well, and I'm sure that there are plenty of places that will give you just enough information on how to get yourself into hot water. But there's probably just as many out there that'll be full of people helpful and willing to let you know exactly where your limits are and what you can do legally so that you can continue to have fun with some of these devices. That's really a matter of preference on why it is or how it is you get into the idea of collecting some of these. Certainly with shotguns, you never cross over into that range because I don't know that you're going to find too much in that realm that you can't put your hands on legally at your local sporting goods store. And I don't know too many people that have the wherewithal to come up with the really extraordinary things you might be able to shoot out of a 12 gauge that would make you go to prison. So if you know those people, probably want to reconsider your friendships. So, JW, what do you think? As far as the ammunition goes, are you aware of anything that really kind of transcends the got to have list? I mean, for me, it's always been the flares. I mean,
Yep.
just the ability to fire off, white flares, and I think now they have infrared flares. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I would like the idea of having my underslung mounted M203 launching on an IR flare, and then turning on my night vision on that field of feral hogs. I mean, what else could you have for
Only
I
in
don't know.
Texas.
Well, yeah, it's a Texas thing, and I'm just
Yeah,
thinking that would be awesome.
I guess I lean towards maybe not having to lug it around on my gun all the time and just go for kind of like a standalone, one of those starter pistol things that fires flares. But, I mean, that's not nearly as exciting as a destructive device.
Well, no.
I've got some
Yeah.
buddies that just went down to Knob Creek this last weekend, and they picked up some 40 mark mics. I don't know what they were, if they're just flares or what, but I'm excited to see what they come up with to shoot them out of.
Well, I'd be interested to see them. So, at the end of the day, nothing really kind of strikes you in the cockles of your heart and says, this is something I really got to get my hands on.
Yeah, I mean, that EGLM looks pretty cool on the Scar. I think I'm going to have a tough time tracking one of those down, though.
Yeah, you might have it that. I tell you what, when it comes down to it, I really do think that it's something that you can entertain in the same way that we've told many of the listeners that we entertain short-barreled rifles and suppressors. The cost, I think, is a lot lower than what you would expect for full auto weapons of virtually any type. $1,500 for the device itself at kind of the higher end. I don't think you're going to exceed much more than $2,000 based on what I've seen in what are they, gun broker retail ads. That is no more than I'm lying there, JW.
Yeah, I think, where was I going? The option of having some of these alternative calibers and munitions is intriguing. I can imagine kind of stepping onto the range at our monthly kind of tactical 3-gun shoot, and they say threat, and whoomp, you launch some smoke downrange. And, you definitely turn some heads. Of course, after you clear it with the RO and all that, but definitely something you don't see very often.
No, no. So, I know that this is something that is probably on the very edge of utility for an AR-focused show, but I will stand my ground to let you know that these things really are only intended to be mounted on AR, so that makes them fair game for us here at the AR15 podcast. So we, once again, I think are being left to our own devices now that our listeners want nothing to do with us, feedback-wise. But so we've only got one piece of feedback today, and I thought I would throw this at you, JW, let you see what you can do to help out.
Sure. Mike says, "Hey guys, can you give me an idea how much force should be needed to seat a fully loaded mag? I built an AR with an SSA lower and PSA upper and 30-round PMags. Empty, the mag seat very easily. Fully loaded, I usually have to hit the bottom of the mag quite hard to get it to latch. I haven't shot an AR before, so all I have to compare to are pistols. Thanks for the help, Mike." Yeah, I actually ran into this at a Carbine 2 class a couple weeks ago that I swung by to visit, and a guy had ended up squeezing 31 rounds into his 30-round magazines. He ate his Wheaties that morning and just decided, hey, I can get one more in there. Why not? And he had a tough time getting that mag to seat with his bolt closed. I think that could be one of the issues, Mike, is that when you're loading your gun, the bolt might be closed, and so that top round is actually going to make contact with the bottom of your bolt carrier, and it's going to need to kind of push the stack of rounds down a little bit. So if there isn't much flex room, then it's going to be really difficult. If you lock that bolt to the rear before charging up the gun with a fresh mag, it's probably going to lock in there a lot easier for you. Some guys will recommend, I only load 28, 29 rounds because I don't want to have to force it in there if I'm doing a kind of an administrative, when I get a chance, just put a fresh mag in. And there's something to be said for that. But I like topping them off all the way. I've got as much as I can in the mags, and when I'm loading up a gun, typically it's starting with bolt to the rear because it's clear and I can see in the chamber and all that. So if you lock it to the rear before you get going, those mags will probably go right in. There's no reason to slam a mag from the bottom. The way I've been taught is to push, pull, make sure it's seated, and then get it going, whether you use the ping pong battle or if you kind of roll it to the side and rack the gun.
That's a good point, JW, because I was thinking back on this, trying to figure out when have I ever had that issue. And in retrospect, my bolt's always open when I'm loading my rifle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was thinking, hard about what I could add to that. And when it comes to the idea of basically seating the mag, and you talk about push and pull, I think that's really, you should be able to seat it simply by pushing it firmly into the mag well and allowing your bolt or your mag catch to hit the magazine in the right spot. If it requires more force than you can realistically apply, seating it that way, I think that it must be something more. Now, open the bolt, seat it with your hands. If everything works, I think your problem's solved. JW, what do you think about the possibility that his magazine catch hasn't been wound in tightly enough?
Yeah, I mean that's an option. He built it from a lower. You definitely have to push kind of from inside the mag well. You got to push it out and really screw that sucker on. So I mean it's possible. If that bolt's locked to the rear and you're slamming the mag in, all you're going to be doing is eating up that notch on your, especially polymer mags.
Right.
So I'd steer clear of applying too much force.
Well, I think that should get you going, Mike. Certainly we want you to report back and tell us if JW's observation basically clears it for you. But honestly, I think that would be the only reason that I don't have that issue myself, is that my bolt's back. So, thanks, JW. So we want to give a shout out to Levi Hinton. Levi was the first winner of our first AR15 podcast giveaway. We're going to have him on the show in the end of October so that you can hear from us who the winner is. And Todd Dixon, we want to let you know that we did receive your entry and your 2 emails informing us that you had entered, because we understand the excitement and the eagerness that all of our listeners have trying to find out who the winner is, but we're trying to hold it down to a dull roar, but we did get your entry, so there you go. Well, JW, you want to start off with a readout so that we can close this show out tonight?
Sure. Remember to send us any questions or comments to feedback@ar15podcast.com. Hey, if you guys have any experience with this underslung stuff, LEO guys, if you run any of these less than lethal options, we'd love to hear from you, because there's some really interesting applications for some of the things that we don't get our hands on too often. So give us a shout at feedback@ar15podcast.com. If you want to send us a recorded voicemail, you can use the SpeakPipe plugin right on our website. It should pop up on the right hand side. Remember to subscribe and listen to the AR15 podcast for free at firearmsradio.tv/iTunes, where we'd love if you left a review so we can be placed higher. And we've got a little competition going on with some of the other shows. We like to be up there towards the top. If you listen to us over on Stitcher, be sure to leave a review there as well. If you're on Flickr and you got some pictures of your latest build or something you've been shooting lately, go ahead and add those to our group, which is flickr.com/groups/blackrifle. Over on Google+, you can watch us live Monday nights at firearmsradio.tv/plus and see some of the news posts that the other guys are putting up there. Visiting us on YouTube at youtube.com/firearmsradio will give you access to our video archive, so you can see us age over the years. If you follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/firearmsradio, you're going to get updates throughout the week from the entire network. Make sure to check out other podcasts because we're always adding new ones. It seems like I never run out of things to listen to on that main FRN feed. Whenever I'm getting in the car or going on a flight, I can always download a bunch of them and have some great stuff to listen to. Don't forget to use our Brownells affiliate link for all your AR-15 parts at ar15podcast.com/parts. And for anything else, there's Amazon. So visit firearmsradio.tv and there's a banner ad that you click through and we get a little tiny percentage point of your purchase.
Well, everybody, we want to thank you for joining us for tonight's irreverent look at things to strap, tape, mount, or Picatinny rail attached to the underside of your AR-15. And for any of you that have complaints, you can blame Jake, because we're going to say that it was his fault for this episode. And if you want to praise us, then send it to JW or myself. With that, we've only got a couple more weeks left, JW, until we announce the winner of our AR-15 podcast giveaway. And in the meantime, we're starting our process of developing our next contest. So anybody has any suggestions, ideas, or just big wishes for what might come down the pike next, let us know, and we will field all of them and see what we can bring into being. So have a good night, have a good week, and we'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later.
This has been a production of the Firearms Radio Network. You can find more information at firearmsradio.tv.